Imagine a massive concrete wall. You picture in your head, it looks completely impenetrable, right? Solid, permanent.
Heavy.
But if you talk to a structural engineer, or really anyone who investigates why big projects fail, they'll tell you something that feels, well, a little counterintuitive.
The failure almost never happens in the middle of that wall.
Exactly. The middle is safe. The failure happens at the seam.
Where the concrete meets the steel. Where the glass meets the window frame.
That is such a fundamental truth of engineering.
It is, but honestly, it's the fundamental truth of organizations, too. Complexity always lives in the connections.
And that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We're looking at this idea of the seam, but in the professional world, it has a much more bureaucratic name.
Interface management.
Interface management. It does sound a bit dry, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Like something you'd find in the back of a dusty filing cabinet.
It does. But reading through these sources, I realized this isn't just paperwork. This is basically high-stakes diplomatic relations for engineers.
That's a great way to put it.
It's the whole discipline of managing the boundaries between systems, between people, between these massive organizations so that, the bridge actually meets in the middle.
That is the goal. And for this deep dive, we're analyzing a very specific set of employer requirements. We're looking at Document E2.9 and all its associated templates, the registers, the logs, the query forms.
So these are the actual rule books,
Yeah.
the things used on major construction projects to stop everything from falling into total chaos.
Pretty much. And our mission today is to understand how these projects define who talks to whom, who owns what decision, and maybe most importantly, what happens when the blueprints just don't match reality.
So where do we start?
Well, you have to define the beast before you can tame it. The source, E2.9, it gives us a very clear definition of an interface.
Okay.
It says an interface is a point of interaction or a common boundary between several systems, people, organizations, stakeholders.
Which, if you really stop and think about it, that covers pretty much everything on a job site.
It does. But then the document drops this really serious warning. It explicitly cites interfaces as one of the main risks in the realization of the works.
That line really stood out to me. It's almost an admission of vulnerability right at the start. It's not the work itself that's the risk.
No.
It's not pouring the concrete. It's the connection point. It's like the document is saying, look, we know you can build a wall and we know you can build a window, but we are terrified you can't make them fit together.
Precisely, because often those two things are being built by two different companies on two different timelines.
Right.
And the whole point, the document says, is to ensure coordination and cooperation. The objective isn't just to have meetings for the sake of meetings. It's to make sure all these different parts function as a single unit.
And it uses this phrase, scope demarcation. That just means drawing a line in the sand, right? Knowing where your job ends and mine begins.
Effectively, yes. But it's a very, very expensive line if you get it wrong. If that line is blurry, what we sometimes call the gray zone, that's where things get dropped.
So if I think you're connecting the power cable and you think I'm connecting it.
Then nobody connects the power cable, and the lights don't turn on.
Okay, so to manage all this, the source document introduces a very specific character, the hero of our story.
The interface coordinator.
The diplomat. I love that this is an actual dedicated job title.
And the document is incredibly strict about this role. It says the contractor's organization has to include a dedicated full-time FTE interface coordinator.
Okay, let's pause on full-time. This isn't a side gig. This isn't something the project manager does on a Tuesday afternoon.
No. And that's a corner companies are always tempted to cut. They think, oh, Bill can handle that in his spare time. This document says absolutely not. This is a 40, 50, 60-hour-a-week job.
And there was another detail in there about continuity that I found fascinating.
That it has to be the same person for the entire duration of the contract.
Wow. I mean, in construction, turnover is huge. People get reassigned, they quit. Why is that specific rule so important for this role?
Think about the relationships. This person is the single point of contact. They hold the entire institutional memory of every handshake, every verbal agreement, every argument.
Ah, so they know where all the bodies are buried.
Exactly. They know why that pipe was moved 6 inches to the left 3 months ago. If you replace them, you lose all that context. You lose the relational capital they've built up.
That makes sense. But they're not just a messenger, right? They don't just forward emails.
No, and that's a critical distinction. The document says they need an adequate mandate. They need authority.
But, and I thought this was a crucial point, The document also says the contractor has to force their own specialist to show up to the meetings too.
Yes, the coordinator can't do it alone. They might be a genius at diplomacy, but they probably don't know the specific load-bearing capacity of a particular steel beam.
So you can't just send the coordinator to face the firing squad alone.
You can't. If the meeting is about structural integrity, the structural engineer has to be there. The coordinator facilitates, but the technical experts have to provide the substance.
So we have the philosophy, the seam, and we have the person, the coordinator. Now let's talk about the actual tools. The document outlines a very specific toolkit.
It does. It starts with the plan, the works-specific interface coordination plan.
And the contractor has just 30 days after the project starts to issue this thing.
30 days. The clock is ticking immediately. It's a sprint.
And this plan it's comprehensive. It covers how documents are exchanged, contact details, meeting schedules.
And critically, how all these interface activities fit into the main construction schedule.
But the part of the toolkit that really blew my mind was the register, attachment 1.
The interface register.
I was expecting, a simple spreadsheet. Pipe A connects to tank B, but it is so much more than that.
It's the living database. It's the central nervous system for the whole project.
I was looking at the examples in the source. I mean, it lists things you'd expect, like piping or electrical, but then it gets into civil work, like site clearing and then procedural stuff.
Yeah, vendor data and factory acceptance tests, those are interfaces too.
Okay, explain that one. How is data an interface?
Well, think about the dependency. If I'm designing the concrete foundation for a huge generator, I can't finish my design until I get the weight, the dimensions, the vibration data from the vendor who's building it. That data transfer is the interface. If the vendor is late with their data, I'm late with my foundation, the concrete doesn't get poured.
And the entire project schedule slides to the right.
Exactly. So vendor data has to be tracked in the register, just like a physical pipe.
My favorite one in the register, though, was temporary facilities. It lists things like utility sewage, warehousing, and gates fencing. It treats the decision of where to put the porta potties with the same level of rigor as a high-voltage power line.
It sounds funny, but think about the logistics on site. Space is a finite resource. If you put the temporary fence in a spot that blocks the swing radius of a crane,
You've got a massive interface failure.
you have a crane that can't move. And a crane that can't move costs thousands of dollars an hour. So yes, even the toilets are an interface. Anything that occupies space or time and impacts another party is an interface.
That's a great way to put it. So looking at this register, there's this coding system for who does what, the Rossi breakdown. Can you walk us through that? It feels like the backbone of this whole system.
It is. For every single line item in that register, you have to assign these rules. First, you have our responsible.
And that's the person who's actually doing the work.
Correct. And the document is emphatic. There can be only one party listed as responsible.
Why is that only one rule so important?
Because if two people are responsible,
Nobody is responsible.
you got it. It's the throat to choke principle. You need one single entity that is on the hook for delivery.
Okay. Then you have O for owner. How is that different from responsible?
This is a nuance that trips people up. In this document, the owner is the specific team member within the responsible party who is the focal point.
So responsible is the company, but owner is Jane Doe, the senior engineer at that company.
Precisely. It puts a name and a face to the task.
Got it. Next up is S for support.
This is usually the party on the other side of the interface. If I'm building the wall and you're installing the window, I'm responsible for the wall, but you are support. I need your window specs to do my job.
Okay, that makes sense. And then C for consult.
That's two-way communication. You have to talk to them, get their input, but they aren't actually doing the work or directly supporting it.
And finally, I for inform.
Just one-way communication. Hey, just letting you know this is happening. They just need to be kept in the loop. They don't get a vote.
I feel like if we applied this RCI model to planning a family vacation, there would be a lot fewer arguments.
It would certainly clarify who's in charge of snacks. But on a project, this clarity is what prevents lawsuits. Everyone knows their lane.
So we have the map, the register. Now let's talk about the actual conversation, the communication loop. The document lays out a pretty strict rhythm for meetings.
It does. The kickoff meeting has to happen within 28 days. Then it's weekly or bi-weekly meetings from there on out.
And it mandates something everyone will appreciate.
Yeah.
An agenda has to be sent out in advance.
Yes. So you don't waste time. You get the right people in the room. You don't have a structural engineer sitting through a meeting about paint colors.
Right. But the most interesting tool in this whole loop, for me, was the IFQ.
The interface query form, attachment 3.
This looks serious. This is not just firing off an email saying, hey, does this pipe fit?
Far from it. This is a formal, tracked mechanism. The form requires a requested reply date, a revision number, a formal signature.
Why go to all that trouble? Why not just use email?
Accountability. Emails get lost, they get buried in an inbox. An IFQ is a tracked document. It has a status, open or closed. It tracks the number of days open.
So if a question sits unanswered for 3 weeks, there's a metric showing exactly whose fault that delay is.
You're creating a paper trail. It forces an answer, and all of this feeds into the interface log.
Attachment 2, the history book.
That's it. It tracks the life of these queries, and the log has to be updated every single time there's a change, or at least once a month.
So 6 months down the line, when the pipe doesn't fit, you can look back at the log and say, well, on February 17th, you signed this document saying it would.
Exactly. It removes the he said, she said from disputes. It protects everyone.
Okay, so all of this assumes we know what all the interfaces are. We've got them in the register. But the document has this section that I found really refreshing. It basically admits we don't know everything.
Section 5.2, yeah. Non-defined interfaces.
It's this humble admission. It says, and I'm quoting, it cannot be ruled out that interfaces emerge that have not been defined.
I love that phrasing. It cannot be ruled out. It's basically saying, look, we tried our best, but reality is messy.
It is. Construction is dynamic. You might discover some weird soil condition that changes the foundation, which then impacts the piping, which then impacts the electrical.
And suddenly you have a brand new collision point that was never on anyone's list.
So what's the protocol when a wild interface appears?
You don't ignore it. It's the contractor's job to identify it, immediately log it, and add it to the interface register.
So you domesticate the wild interface.
To bring it into the system, yes. You assign a responsible party, an owner, and you manage it just like all the planned ones.
And this ties into the reporting, right? The monthly progress report isn't just about what you built.
No, it has to include a specific section on interfaces. And it asks for the top 10 critical interface issues.
Not just a general update. It forces them to name the 10 most dangerous connection points every single month.
Right. And it also asks for the status of cooperation.
That's an interesting one. That feels subjective, like Bob is being difficult this month.
It probably is a bit subjective, but it's vital. If one party is consistently missing meetings or failing to answer queries, that's a huge project risk. Reporting on cooperation gives the project owners the leverage to step in.
You know, we started this by talking about how cracks happen at the seams of a wall. And going through all this, the coordinators, the registers, the queries, it really strikes me that interface management is just the rigorous application of structure to human communication.
That is a perfect way to put it. We tend to think if everyone is good at their individual job, the project will just succeed. But this document argues that's not enough.
You have to be good at connecting your job to someone else's.
It's defining the who, the where, and the when of every single handshake on a project.
And the key takeaway for me is really that role of the interface coordinator. In a world of specialists and silos, they're the only one whose job is to look at how all the pieces fit together.
They are the bridge, and without them, you don't have a picture, you just have a pile of puzzle pieces.
So here's a final thought for you to mull over. We've looked at this through the lens of engineering, but what if we applied this interface logic to our daily lives?
It's a compelling thought. So many misunderstandings we have with friends or family or colleagues happen because we never actually defined the interface. We never said, okay, I am responsible for this decision, but I will consult you.
We just assumed. If we actually assigned clear owners, supporters, and informants to our own daily chaos, how many arguments could we avoid? Maybe next time you're planning a dinner party, you break out the RCI matrix.
Just, maybe don't ask your spouse to formally sign an IFQ form for taking out the trash. That might be its own interface risk.
Proceed with caution. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
If you're interested in the templates, please visit our shop. The link is in the description.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and see next time.